Welcome to the Beyond Physio Podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community.
Welcome to the Beyond Physio Podcast. I'm Dr. David Kwon. I'm here with Steve and Jess, both professional licensed counselors with an emphasis on sports psychology. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Jessica Colucci. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I have a few focuses that I work on. One of them mainly sports performance. Then I also work with children and adolescents, anxiety, trauma, a whole bunch of other kind of things that we might see along the way, mental health wise.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
And I'm Steve Neer. I'm also a licensed professional counselor at the Lukin Center. I too have a focus on sports performance, but I also, work with individuals having difficulties with interpersonal issues, anxiety issues, depression, and really anything. OCD.
And you guys were both athletes. I know you were a swimmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, former athlete, former swimmer. I was a swimmer for 17 years, so grew up swimming at my local YMCA, Fanwood Scotch Plains YMCA, for 12 years. And then that took me to college at Northeastern University. So
Nice.
I swam Division I for my 4 years of eligibility and was captain my senior year.
Wow.
Swimming and diving team.
That's all amazing. So, and then Steven, you're also a athlete.
Yes. I played baseball growing up. I played a whole bunch of different sports, but baseball was my main focus. I actually sustained a fracture in my L5 vertebrae in high school.
Ouch.
Yeah. And it sidelined me for quite a while. So entering college, I found CrossFit, fell in love with it, started competing quite a bit in that. 10 years, honestly. Also have competed at USA Weightlifting Nationals for 3 straight years. I did a marathon actually with Jess.
Wow.
We did one last year.
In 2022. So really just like to have my hand in a little bit of everything.
Gotcha. All-around athlete. And the Pascack Valley Triathlon.
That's
sponsored by Next Level Physio.
That's right.
Well, my age group.
That's right. It's got a sweet water bottle. Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah.
So, given that you guys have an emphasis on sports psych and also being athletes yourself, how would you say, the mental health aspect or the mental aspect of performance has kind of shaped, your experience with athletics and sports?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly was one of those athletes that was very obsessive about my sport. I took everything extremely seriously, which meant I practiced a lot and I felt like I, was very capable, but at the same time, I could not tolerate any mistakes, any errors. The self-talk that I had going on in my head would frighten, I think, a lot of people. And it was something that I wish I was able to examine a little bit earlier and just, recognize really what it all meant. It meant the world to me, right? So if I had, found a way to be able to, really recognize that, hey, this is, something that is supposed to be fun. This is with your teammates, you're making friends, you're building relationships, and really made it about that. I felt like I could have truly benefited from, some more consistency, not so much burnout, physical burnout as well. Talking about the injury I sustained, just overworking myself, overusing myself. And I think that would have been a really valuable thing for me to have.
And similar, for baseball, you were team sport, but being a swimmer, it is you, and the line on the bottom of the pool. So you have a lot of time to think, and it's really easy to get in your own head and get in your own way. The only time swimming is an interesting cross-section of individual and team sport, because the better that you swim, it's also going to score points for your team. And then also we have relays, which, comes down to, of course, you and 3 other people on that relay to do well for your team. But you're fighting against the clock every single time. So the negative self-talk is very easy to build up. And you also have a lot of time with your head in the water to think about that negative self-talk.
Yeah.
So I wish I knew what I know now. I thought mental health treatment in high school, but it had nothing to do with my performance for swimming. It was more mental health related and trauma related. But so that was when my world was kind of open to it, which was really cool to be able to have that support system. But I wish that, we had something like this program that we're trying to build out at the Lukin Center to be able to have some type of mental health support and working on that performance piece more specifically, consistently.
So tell me a little bit about it, the program that you guys are building at the Lukin Center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're hoping to build out a sports performance program. Well, we are. I'm hoping it's happening. And so I am the assistant director of our community training and development at the Lukin Center. I'm really passionate about getting mental health accessible to people everywhere. So our goal is to really do a lot of outreach in our communities where we serve our population of people. So we have our individual counseling, and then we want to be able to bring mental health programs to students, to parents, to teachers, in the business sect of things as well. So then we're opening it up to the sports performance side with Steve coming in too, where how cool would it be to be doing trainings on mental health sports performance for athletes, student athletes, coaches, parents, the all-around family. So we're hoping to do some trainings, mental health trainings, and then also giving individual counseling as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different supports that athletes have, right? They have everything that Jess had just listed. So including that component, I think, is extremely valuable for everyone to be on the same page and, really understand different emotional dynamics that go into being an athlete, figuring out how to address that, how to use appropriate mindfulness and coping skills, and how to be able, again, to break that separation between, the athlete's identity as an athlete and make it about them as a person and, more of that holistic role of themselves in the world.
Yeah. So, I think that kind of brings us to our next question. Like, what are, throw a random number out there, 3 things that athletes specifically need to adjust or be concerned about when it comes to sports performance and their mental health?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind for me, it's been referenced a couple times in here, but I really do, want to zero in on that focus of separating between yourself as an athlete and yourself as a person. Because once we start having that negative self-talk about one bad play, right? Like you make an error in the field as a baseball player, that's the easiest example for me. You start saying things to yourself like, I am the worst fielder that ever existed. And, I can't field anything. And the reality is that's not true. And if you continue to tell yourself that, you're going to be in your head and you're not going to be present for the next play. So in the short term, it definitely benefits you. And then in the long term, just more accurately be able to address whatever happened by saying, I made a mistake on that one play. There's plenty of more plays to come for the rest of the game. And then kind of learn and grow from that versus just ruminate and frustrate yourself. I think that is so big for the long term as well when it comes to burnout. What else do you think is really valuable? I'm going to get you.
I think support is really valuable, which I think is really cool about this program is we're hoping to wrap around services for everybody. So how do you support your athletes? How do you support a young athlete where maybe the parents aren't putting the pressure on them, but the child is putting the pressure on themselves to perform in a certain way? So I think it's really nice to be able to think about how important it is that the support system and the support network is there, and for any athlete to know who those people are to lean into that support as well, so that they're not going through it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third thing that I really think about is just different skills, different mental coping skills that people can utilize. Honestly, very basic coping skills. And what's funny is like people, I think, kind of roll their eyes when they think about coping skills a little bit, but the people that actually use it works, especially consistently. It's like saying, hey, you want to get healthier? Like, you have to, make sure that you're eating appropriately. You need to eat salads. You need to eat, meats and whole foods and all these types of things. And if you do it one time, you're not automatically healthy. It's a habit of, consistency where it's going to start benefiting you. So using different mindfulness skills, bringing yourself back to the moment versus that rumination or that worry about the future. Because on the field of play, there are so many dynamics to think about that are happening So if you start thinking about a play that's happened in the past, it's only going to distract you and take you away from the task at hand. So being able to bring yourself back to the moment, there are so many different skills that people can use, using your senses. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell, taste, touch in the moment, to just bring you back to what's happening, I think is a very valuable skill. So I think, support, separation of identity, and skills are really three huge things I think athletes can use to benefit themselves.
Where do you see the value of being proactive about mental health and your ability to perform rather than being reactive to, poor performance when it comes to, these sorts of skills or support or, perspective?
I was going to say, I think this is like the biggest struggle overall in the mental health field is we're a very reactive field. People are not calling us because they feel really good.
Yeah.
And they just want somebody to talk to and chit chat about once a week. I mean, how cool that would be.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we are there as a support when things are being reactive.
We're firefighters.
We are.
Yeah, no, I feel that way too.
Yeah,
Like, as a physical therapist, it would be great if people came to me like, oh, I want to prevent my shoulder from hurting. Like,
Right.
I've hurt it in the past. I want to make sure that I don't get it to hurt when I'm doing CrossFit or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, big
Definitely
time.
something we can relate on.
Yes, absolutely. So we want to be able to get trainings out. I think that on that side too, just thinking about if we are in working with athletes, working with support networks, working with teachers, coaches, we're kind of there to say, hey, we're going to be doing these trainings. We're going to be getting ahead of it. We're going to be giving these skills out. And then if your athletes need more support, then they can maybe come individually or we can work even more in depth on that. So that would be a way to be proactive, to get it out there, get our names out there, get the idea of sports performance out there so that athletes have somewhere to look, or maybe they didn't think about it and are like, oh, wow, there is this huge connection between my mental health and my performance. And maybe that is a good idea to go get a therapist for myself and start working through things that maybe they didn't realize were there until they start digging into it.
Yeah, and a lot of times when people do come in reactively as well, they have this sort of mindset of when are the symptoms going to get better? Mm-hmm. So when it becomes all about that, it's almost like trying to make sleep happen if you're not sleeping. The more you're thinking about it, anyone who does that and actually sleeps well, you have to be able to sort of just let it happen naturally. So by getting in there proactively, you are able to establish these, healthy relationships, these healthy skills, this healthy outlook and perspective. So again, kind of creates that separation between that and your performance. So it's not like, oh, it's not working, I'm not playing better.
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe sometimes there are actual physical limitations to be considered on that front, but secondarily, it's just something that is going to make it more about the result versus the process.
Yeah. Well, very strong carryover between the two fields. I mean, like, I'll have patients, they came because their knee hurt, right? Mm-hmm. But what we really try to focus on is like the root cause of like what is driving that knee pain. Maybe it is just your knee, but there's probably other forces at hand that are causing that knee issue, right? Whether it's maybe you have some ankle immobility that's preventing your knee mechanics from kind of working well, but what's driving that ankle immobility? Like, is it some hip range of motion issues? So, I mean, we're always trying to get to the root cause of any issue, whether it's the knee or whether it's, your poor performance at baseball. So, I mean, like, the focus in terms of all health should be on root cause rather than be reactionary towards bad symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a stigma too. Like, people don't want to admit things are wrong with them. Yeah. And I know, actually, speaking to injuries, there are times where, my knee's been a little tweaked and I tell myself, no, that's normal. Like, it's supposed to click every now and then, like, not a big deal. And then that's when I'm becoming reactive because down the line, there's an injury that comes up, right? So quite similarly with mental health, we have that as well, where you start noticing that, maybe the canary in the coal mine, like you're having trouble sleeping, you're starting to be a little bit more quick triggered when it comes to your anger and snapping. And these might be little warning signs like, hey, get in. Let's get you in there and start working on these things.
Oh, interesting. I mean, maybe we could extrapolate a little bit on that. Like, what are some warning signs that, might signal that maybe you should take care of something that might be brewing?
Yeah. Well, especially working with kids, I talk about this a lot. Parents will come in and they'll say their behavior is so bad. Well, an indication of behavior being bad is children not being able to identify their emotions properly. They can't really express what it is because they don't have the language quite yet. So that goes for adults too. We're not different in that way, even though we think we are. You're going to see a behavior before you're going to see somebody actually expressing what that root cause is. And maybe they don't know what it is yet. So, I mean, if I'm going with my child and adolescent brain, you're going to see outbursts, difficulty in school. Sometimes you have your kids who hold it together during school and they come home and they let loose and unleash on everybody in the house, which is the more common picture. Sleeping difficulties, not eating, especially younger kids. The three things that they can control is toileting, eating, and sleeping. So you're going to see the most difficulties there.
Oh, interesting.
And then as we get older, toileting tends to go away.
Yeah.
But then you get that still eating and sleeping difficulties are still there because it's a sense of control. So the things that there's perceived control about, they're going to try and take control. And then when they don't have that, then you're going to get outbursts. You're going to get hitting, punching, kicking, crying, absolute meltdown, throwing themselves to the floor. So you're going to start to see a lot of that behavior kind of shine through, and it does go through the lifespan, just starts to change a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, usually I like to think of it as either internalizing things or externalizing things. So Jess touched on a lot of the externalizing things about these outbursts, about these behaviors, but also if you notice, you're a little bit more quiet, you're not as engaged with other people, you might be stuck ruminating, you're not as present. And I think that if you're finding yourself having difficulty being in the moment, that's a big sign as well that, there's something going on that needs addressing.
Yeah, the shutdown.
Yeah, the shutdown.
Do you find that with kids, it tends to be a little more external, and with adults, it tends to be a little more internal?
Yeah,
I think that's a part of it. I think culture is a part of it too. And, there are kids that internalize and there are adults that externalize, but I would say more generally speaking, that's pretty ongoing. Yeah.
And like an example of adults externalizing would be like drinking every day or, being violent or belligerent or I say
ineffective coping mechanisms, substance use, more anger, outbursts, maybe, the things that you might see on Instagram or TikTok of people yelling in a Starbucks, something like that.
We are witnessing a mental health breakdown.
Yes, quite literally. And people are sticking their phones in it, and it's difficult because that person very likely needs help, and it's really hard to extrapolate that. So,
yeah, I mean, part of me thinks like, are we going through a mental health crisis, or is it just that we're filming more of it?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think the former. Like, I think like we are going through a mental health crisis with COVID and everything else that happened. Like, I think we're all just collectively traumatized.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder, like, is a video camera just more accessible that we're just capturing more of these people having mental breakdowns?
I think it's a fair point. I also think on some level, the filming of it is also perpetuating a lot of it because people are kind of seeing it and then they're immediately going to like, oh, look what the world has turned to. And you kind of have this defeatist attitude of, on a macro scale, there's so many problems that people are going through. And it really just, I think, perpetuates that
sense of hopelessness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So getting back to sports and sports psych, we're talking a little bit before we start recording about, there are a lot of high level athletes that are very mentally unwell, like, take every wide receiver for the Steelers. People that are not mentally well doesn't necessarily indicate their sports performance. How do you kind of discern between the two? Like, why are they able to disassociate or compartmentalize their sports performance with their overall mental health?
Yeah, so I was talking a little bit before. Michael Phelps is always a really good athlete to kind of put up in this example, because you take the most decorated Olympian of all time, and it's tough sometimes. I like get on my soapbox about it. I'm like, I don't think people understand how hard it was what Michael Phelps did. I think some people get it, but to do what he did and to have a team behind him too, where it is such an individual sport as well, to get the medals that he did in all of the relays that he swam in. It's just a feat that, I know Mark Spitz did 7 medals and he was sitting in the stands saying, Phelps isn't going to do it. I don't think he wanted his record broken, understandably so. But it's just a crazy concept. And Michael talks a lot about his mental health. And he did a documentary recently. It wasn't super in-depth. I wanted a little bit more out of him, but he did talk about his mental health struggles and kind of the switch he had to turn off and on in order to get to the level that he achieved. And it seems like what happened was a lot of his supports kind of fell to the wayside. So he had his mom, he had his coach, he had other swimmers, but he really just had to focus on himself. So if you start to pull away, we know one of the biggest indicators of mental health difficulty is lack of or difficulty in interpersonal relationships. That's the leading cause of anxiety and depression a lot of the time. So if you're cutting yourself off from the people who are giving you a lot of support, you're only focusing on yourself. Yeah, when he's obsessing over what he's doing in the pool, he's going to continue to be the best in the pool, but maybe he's not going to continue to be the best outside of that. And that's where he kind of was having more of those mental health difficulties, anxiety, depression, because he wasn't feeling fulfilled overall.
Do you feel like it is possible to achieve those heights of performance and still be mentally well balanced?
Man, that is such a tough question. Honestly, I could be wrong. I'm open to, seeing someone that says otherwise, but my belief from what I've witnessed and observed is no. I really don't think you can be the best at anything in life without sacrificing a huge bit of mental health. I think a big part of mental health is balance. And anyone who is the highest achieving thing at anything, and we're talking about athletics, so let's stick with that. There's no balance in their life. I mean, Jess, we haven't said this, she's actually my wife, and she's supported me through quite a bit of my athletic endeavors, and she can comment on how even myself, I didn't achieve at a level, even in the same conversation as like a Michael Phelps, but with my sport, I had to sacrifice a lot in order to be able to achieve at the level that I achieved at. And I can only imagine as you go up that ladder, it doesn't get easier. It only gets more sacrifice and less balance. And some people are able to make that compartmentalization. They're able to just use their sport as a way of coping with whatever issues might be going on in their life. But yeah, I guess that's my sort of belief as to why the answer is no to that.
I'd say it's pretty isolating at the top because you've had to work so hard to get there, and it pays off in dividends for athletes who are able to achieve it. But there has to be a little bit of a level. I'm not saying that all top athletes are narcissists, but there has to be a level of ego that would have to put forth in order for you to get there, because you do have to put other things to the wayside. And like you're saying, there were little snippets of it. It's not like you shut everybody out of your life, but there was, we were like going to a dinner and having to be home by a certain time so that you can get enough sleep to wake up to perform in the morning for a training session, or, not drinking, not eating certain ways. And I saw it firsthand, the amount of people that comment on his food, his behavior in terms of not drinking, all these social norms that people want him to do or us to do and be like, let's have fun, let's go out, let's do X, Y, and Z. And having to say no, it's got to be really hard, especially when the pressure is being put on.
Absolutely. I want to be like, I know I'm crazy. Like, it is very isolating. You do, find yourself on an island. And I just want to comment on, I know it's kind of, ironic here that we're here talking about sports performance and also balance at the same time. And I just said, no, it's not possible to be the best at something and be mentally healthy. But we also have to keep in mind that these people are such extreme outliers that are achieving at that level. For the general population, what we're looking at is consistency. So just being able to show up each day is going to benefit you more in the long run. And the best way to do that is to have balance in your life. The longest amount of time that you can spend competing and practicing and playing is going to serve you so much better than anything else. And those guys, let's be honest too, they're just genetically gifted. There needs to be that consideration. Phelps literally looks like he was molded to be able to swim.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
Wild. His wingspan, his feet, like everything, when you just look at him,
It's designed to be a swimmer.
Textbook is crazy. Even his stroke, when you break it down, he's one of the few swimmers who swims in a textbook manner.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are all very, good points. But I mean, that is like 0.001% of the population, right? In terms of everyday people like you or me, we could achieve at a very high level in whatever endeavor we choose, whether it's, sports or being a D1 athlete, and still have balance, still have good mental health, and achieve all the goals that we want with the least amount of consequences later on in life, right? I mean, we take a look at all these, stories about Aaron Hernandez and, people that have very poor mental health achieved at a very high level. And after their sport was stripped away from them, like, what are they left with? Right. And, what I think we're just trying to get at is that even though the people at the top might have had a sacrifice, those aspects of their life, there are consequences to that sacrifice later on in life. And us as regular people, like, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have multi-million-dollar contracts and like a whole family of people that you need to support and community that's relying on you, blah, blah, blah. We could achieve at a very high level and still have good balance and mental health in terms of our everyday lives and have minimal consequences later on in life because of, maybe the things that we sacrificed, right?
Yeah. And, it's so difficult, I think, for super high level athletes. Like, I think of someone like Simone Biles too, where now we're throwing social media into the mix and how that impacts mental health, especially for an athlete. All these people sitting at home on their couches had a lot of things to say about Simone and her not participating or completing the Olympics. But what she was going through was so unsafe for her to continue. She literally had the yips. Like, that's my best description of it.
Yeah.
And
what are the yips?
It's like, you ever see like a catcher who all of a sudden forgets how to throw the ball back to the pitcher? It's like that. But as Jess was about to say, we're now talking about gymnastics and you're flipping upside down and who knows what happens. You just lose your spatial awareness.
Yeah.
Right. The level of risk for her safety. And what was behind that reactionary is her mental health. That was the leading thing. That was the difficulty there. And so many people were commenting, she should, she's doing this for America. She needs to continue to compete. And it's like, well, if you're not an athlete, you don't understand what she's going through, or just even a human really to understand what she's going through. We really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. All we know is she made the best decision for herself and her team and the United States at that point. I know it felt like a lot was riding on her back. And now, I don't know if you guys have seen any clips, but she's at Worlds or was just at Worlds and she's dominating, you know? So it's back for her. And she needed that break to be able to step back, work on herself, and get herself to perform in the way she wanted to. And that's an individual journey, or when you take social media, people think that they're a part of it. They think that they have some stake in this game, but they don't, So it's really an interesting kind of impact that it can have. And it seems like she shut out the noise.
That's a good example of how mental health or working on some of these aspects actually improved her performance in the long run rather than, hurt it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, she's a human being, right? So if all these people are looking at her, and I'm assuming they're looking at her as just being a machine to compete and perform for the United States of America, and think about what that does to you as a human being if that's all you're doing and that's all you're viewed as. I'm sure she has some level of awareness of that. So for her to make that decision, and to, at least in the short term, it seems like it's paying off in huge ways, is amazing for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was watching the quarterbacks documentary on Netflix, and in the episodes, Kirk Cousins, now one of my favorite sports people, He's on my fantasy football team. I traded away some players for him. Anyway, so Kirk Cousins was meeting with us sports psych on a weekly basis. Do you feel like, we watch people like Kirk Cousins and, other people maybe seeking out mental health to improve sports performance, but do you feel like that is helpful for like an everyday athlete, the high school kid, a D1 athlete, meeting consistently with a mental health professional, just talking through the events of the past week and how their performance panned out?
If you had someone who came in because they had an injury and they started coming to you and started working on these different exercises to address the different problems that they had, would you want them to continue to kind of check in every now and then after things are seemingly all good? Absolutely, right? Just to make sure that those muscles are still working and they're going to, go up the chain and support the knee. So similarly, when it comes to mental health, I think that it absolutely is something that you want to continue to encourage after, things quote unquote get better, right? And I think this can work for youth athletes just to kind of put these mechanisms in place. It can work for higher level athletes, older athletes. I think it always helps to go back and brush up, on the basics, right? Like if we're thinking about, a basketball player, right? Like you still do layup drills, right? Even though you can hit it from half court, so it's just something I think at all points in time, it really is helpful to just bring yourself back to, to ground zero.
Yeah. Working on the fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this before, I wish that I had it at school, especially in college, when you're learning as a Division I athlete, you go through doing a sport for fun, and then you go to getting paid for the sport that you're doing, and it's also leading your college career. Obviously, they always say you're a student first, then you're the athlete. That was something that I heard constantly, time and time again. And it's true to a degree until you're handing the papers over to your professors and saying, I need excuses for these dates because I'm going to be away for a swim meet and I'm missing this test. I'm going to need to make this up. You're doing a lot more legwork on the other end. And I wish that we had somebody that was just on retainer for the team to say, okay, everybody's going to see this person or, multiple people to be able to work on their mental health and kind of do that play by play, week by week. Okay, here's what happened this week. Let's break it down. What were the negative cognitions you had about yourself? How did the meet go? How did you perform? Did you do well? Did you not do well? Where's the breakdown in between? It's kind of silly, but we just, we really love Ted Lasso. I don't know if you guys
love Ted Lasso.
And I love that they highlighted having a sports psychologist on staff and all of the players kind of going in and seeing, oh, wow, this person can be really helpful.
Yeah.
You see the line of them getting ready to go in, and obviously, television, and it's a little bit fake there in that regard, but it's just cool to have that highlighted somewhere now where it was such a big show. And we're kind of putting that on the map of, oh, wow, athletes really can get the support and it doesn't need to be reactionary. We can be working on this week by week and consistently giving the help that athletes need to be the best for themselves in their sport and just the best for themselves outside of their sports too.
Can you guys give me an example of, an athlete that you don't, obviously you're not revealing who this athlete is, but like an athlete, and take us through what issue they had, how you guys kind of addressed it, and like what the result was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one that comes to mind for me right away. Middle school athlete, baseball player, very good baseball player, but keep in mind also middle school, right? So any pressures that are put on to perform, in the grand scheme of things, we want that person to really recognize exactly the reality of playing in a game and making a mistake, right? So really what I was seeing was a lot of that internalization whenever there was a mistake that was made. And what we did is we walked through and talked about, what are you saying to yourself when you make an error? What happens? What are the words that are going through your mind? And they were able to tell me, they were saying, I'm the worst. I'm terrible. I'm not good. And what I did was I kind of played lawyer with them. So I essentially said, okay, a lawyer's here to present a case. They're here to provide evidence to support a certain side. Give me all the evidence that you have that you're the worst, you're a terrible player, and that you're no good. And honestly, didn't really give me much other than I made an error one time. And I was like, well, is Derek Jeter a terrible baseball player? He made loads of errors in his career, right? And he's like, well, no. Well, like, it doesn't really count as evidence then, right? Play the other side of it. Where's the evidence that supports the opposite, right? So just to kind of ground it and recognize, hey, like on a scale of 1 to 10, making a mistake in a game in terms of what it looks like in the grand scheme of things as yourself as an athlete is like a 1 or a 2, right? It's not anything bigger than that, right? So being able to do that, encourage different skills like journaling, writing about these things, to be able to put it out on paper and see truly what it is that you're saying to yourself and how accurate is it really. It helps to create more accurate language. And this individual, I gave them a coping skill of using a rubber band. So whenever they made a mistake on the field, they would just snap the rubber band on their hand. And what that did is it was sort of like this mantra or this reminder of, hey, be right here now. I can feel it, right? Talking about those different mindfulness skills.
Be present.
Be present, exactly, to move on from that next play and be there in the moment. And it worked. They started really being able to just use more accurate language. They were able to use that coping skill on the field, and things are going smoothly for now for them.
Awesome. Do you...
Yeah, I have something super similar. So just to kind of piggyback off of that, I had a young male baseball player, a little bit younger. He was actually only in 5th grade at the time.
Oh, wow.
See, I know. And all this pressure on himself that he was putting, like it's like not T-ball at the time, but it's baseball. But, it was a little, the ante felt a little bit up, and the parents were coming in saying he is throwing his helmet, throwing his bat. He got kicked out of games, yelling at the umpire, yelling at his teammate.
Wow.
See, really, really big behavior. He was putting all this pressure on himself. And when we broke it down, we were going through the thought process and the emotions of it. So I always do, since he's a little bit younger, I always teach emotions. I teach coping skills with the emotions. I always like to do anything that you can always have accessible, which is your hand. So I'm always teaching kids that they can trace their hands to help them feel calm and pull their worries away. Or they can tap, tap, tap their fingers, maybe a mantra when they're feeling angry, like I can feel calm, I can do this, whatever it is on each syllable. So we were working on the coping skills on the forefront of it. And then when we started to get to the thoughts and the beliefs, very similarly, I'm the worst baseball player ever. I made an error. I can't believe I did that. I did the same exact thing as talking about his favorite baseball player. We had a little bit of a banter. He was the Yankees. He came in his first session with all the Yankees gear on. He did not want to be there. I'm a Red Sox fan. So I immediately went in on that and I said, we're going to have a little bit of a problem. And he clicked with it. He liked it. So what I did was I started showing him some YouTube videos of Red Sox players making errors. But then I was like, hey, Yankee players also, they're not always so great either. And he would just laugh and he would laugh and he would laugh. And the parents started to see a little bit of a change of him on the field. He stopped yelling at the umpires, stopped throwing his stuff. And he actually graduated out of therapy because he was doing so well. And he hasn't come back. So I take that as a good sign.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't mean to toot your horn there, but I honestly think using that role model as an example, especially for a younger one, is so valuable too, because there is this sort of like idealized version as a kid of what the super athletes are doing.
Yeah. They're perfect.
They're perfect. They never make mistakes, right? They're humans.
Yeah.
Inevitably make mistakes too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He was a huge Aaron Judge fan. So I was like, here is Aaron Judge.
For the record, I am a Yankees fan. People know shit.
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for your time. I think that we had some amazing insights about mental health, about its relationship to sports performance, and kind of like how to compartmentalize or not compartmentalize these aspects of mental health and, people's life in general. I mean, not everyone's an athlete, but everyone has to perform. And, whether they're an accountant or whether they're on the baseball field, there are going to be aspects of that anxiety in relation to performance and, life that people can take away with. I mean, I want to be the best physical therapist in the world. That's my goal. And I'm going to try to achieve it at the highest level possible. And, some of these coping skills or some of the issues with support, that's all part of it, right? Whether, that's a part of your life or not. But thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. Matt, do you have... So what are some tips, let's say 3 tips for a parent that has a kid that is in sports that are just not performing or showing some behaviors that are not ideal?
So I'll comment on the athletes, and then Jess can take over when it comes to the parents. Three tips for an athlete. I think the number one is to journal, write things down. A lot of times we think we can sort things out in our head. It's very valuable to be able to write down and see it for what it is and kind of separate it from you. The second one is to really recognize, in the grand scheme of things, what mistakes mean, right? Just, it's not a failure when you make a mistake, it's a failure when you give up and quit. So being able to recognize ultimately that is, what really matters. And the third one is to surround yourself with supports, to recognize who are the people that are there to build you up and who are the people that are really, not so much there for you and for your betterment, so to speak.
Yeah. My tips for parents, I love my parents dearly, but I'm going to pull a quote from my father. When I had a bad race, one of my dad's favorite things, he was always trying to lighten the mood, but he always used to say, "Would you stop and ask for directions?" Funny, not helpful. Brutal. Still does. He actually said it at the triathlon too. I'm like, so, I know that my parents always supported me and loved me, and they actually are really good role models when it comes to this. Trying to always validate. You want to validate your kids' experience. You want to see how they felt about how the game went, how the race went. Don't just jump to conclusions because they might have a different experience of what happened. So validating their feelings without putting your own stuff on it. So, hey, your time was really great. What'd you think about it? Asking the questions to them. Get their feedback first before you're then going to respond. And if they are being hard on themselves, then maybe that's an indication for a next step, maybe getting them into some therapy if they aren't already, or just encouraging them. If they do have a therapist already, that might be really something. Why don't you write it down and talk about it with your therapist for next time? I think that that's something that could be really helpful. Parents really want to be fixers, but sometimes we kind of have to let the professionals do their thing as well. And parents can still support and validate, but not necessarily overstepping on that trying to fix aspect either. And then the other piece too is just really not putting pressure, being hard on them and allowing them to be the athletes that they want to be, kind of going back into that listening, seeing where your kid is at, hearing them, not forcing things where it shouldn't be forced, just allowing for that really open space for your child who may be an athlete to, perform to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. As a parent of 3, I'm going to definitely take a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
Oh, fun question.
It's going to be a quick rapid fire. Also a parent of 3, and then coached my son through baseball up until freshman year. I can appreciate everything you said. It was difficult to make that balance. But once that perspective shifts from a Hall of Fame baseball player doesn't get a hit 70% of the time. So 70% of the time is failure. And if you fail 70% of the time, you're one of the best. Right. So you got to live in that failure. Embrace the suck. Yeah. Or be a goldfish.
Yeah, be a gold. All
right, real quick.
Yeah.
So you guys won the lottery, but in order to collect, you had to work a job for the rest of your life, 40 hours, nothing crazy. It cannot be the job that you do right now. And Steve, you can't pick youth pastor. That's too easy for you to switch into.
Okay.
I got it.
You got it. Okay, go ahead. I would work on a farm with animals.
Okay.
Yeah. Head into the farm.
I'd be a CrossFit coach.
Excellent. It's a good question. I don't know. I think I would open a brewery.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's cool. Open up a coffee shop, something.
Yeah.
We talked about the romantic idea of opening up a coffee shop. And
it's not that romantic at 5 a.m. It's time to brew the coffee.
For the rest of your life, would you rather be blind or have to live inside of an Olive Garden?
Oh man, I don't know the answer.
This is awful. I'd be blind. Yeah, I'd be blind.
No. Not an Olive Garden fan. Not at all.
Oh yeah, you're Italian? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's blasphemous. I think my nonna would come down if I sat in the Olive Garden right now and smite me.
Yeah. I'm gonna go blind too. I just think it's almost like jail, even though it's fine, you get food, but just in the same place.
100%.
Where it is, unless it's I don't know, Disney
Yeah, there's a lot of blind people that live very full lives and very happy.
You can go places. You can go things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. No, I agree. Blinds.
Yeah.
No Olive Garden.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.